listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad Uncut, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Hello and welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast, and welcome to my unfiltered guest, Scott Miller. Good morning and thank you for joining me.
Mohammed, good morning to you. Thank you for the platform today.
It's a pleasure to have you here, only because I know how you believe in true servant leadership, and I always talk about the wonders of Franklin Covey on here. And so, without further ado, I'm going to give a bit of background who Scott Miller is and what he brings to our conversation today. So, Scott Miller, it's the only thing that's scripted, by the way, is a 25-year associate of Franklin Covey, and serves as the Executive Vice President and Thought Leadership. Scott hosts the world's largest and fastest growing podcast newsletter devoted to leadership development, On Leadership. And he's the author of the multi-week Amazon #1 release management mess. There you go, to leadership success, 3D challenges to become the leader you would follow, and the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, the 6 critical facts for leading a team. Additionally, Scott served under the tutelage of Dr. Stephen R. Covey for close to 2 decades as a sales producer and sales leader. Scott lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, with his wife and 3 sons, and I have the honor and the utmost pleasure to welcome you as my guest today. So enough with the script. Let's get to it. If anybody can tell me a few things about leadership, it's you, Scott. In your own words, from your own experiences, what motivates you and gives you the passion to be the leader that you want to be. Can you share with my listeners, what does leadership mean to you?
I think leadership is a combination of humility, confidence, vulnerability. It's about getting work done with and through other people. And that's fairly elementary, but profound. I mean, think about that. A leader's mindset, their job, is to get work done with and through other people. And when you believe that, you slow down, you're more patient, you coach, you mentor, you listen, you share your own failures as well as your successes, and you really think about caring for your people. Because I think one of the biggest disservices that has been done in organizations is 2 things. One is we tend to promote people into leadership roles that should not be leaders of people. Not everyone should be a leader of people. I just don't believe that. Just like not everyone should be a commercial airline pilot or an anesthesiologist. Not everyone should be a leader of people, and that's okay. And I think the other thing is, once you're in leadership, you have to realize that people are not your most valuable asset. It's not true. People are not an organization's most valuable asset. It's the relationships between those people.
Wow.
That is your ultimate competitive advantage. And as a leader, as the leader of people, your job is to model and foster those relationships to build a high trust, high competent culture, because that's what's going to differentiate you from all your competition. Everybody can copy your patents, your logos, your colors, your supply chain, your pricing, your technology. Everything can be patented and then stolen, and it is. What cannot be stolen is how your people work together. I think that's the role of a leader.
And it's the relationships that you create that can be transferred, that can be stolen, that can be taken away from you, right? And you talk about trust, you talk about servant leadership, you talk about caring. I do see a change. I've been in the leadership area for maybe 20 plus years, and I've been exposed to how leaders lead. And I can tell you that I wasn't always the sort of leader that I am today, or the sort of leader that I respected. We've all been there, right? Yeah. Leadership, I was taught by how I saw others model leadership was do as I ask you to do. And, these are the rules, follow them. It was very authoritarian. It was very much, I am in charge of what you get done. I'm basically in charge of you. And that didn't give us the opportunity to grow. It didn't give us the opportunity to feel safe. And it certainly didn't give us the opportunity to feel that we could show up as we were outside of the work, right? Outside of the walls of work. We had to become the role that these so-called leaders wanted us to follow. We were nothing more than assets. We were a tangible that the company owned. But to your point, when you take out that human beings are actually assets and you turn them into relationship builders and motivators and people who can embody the values that govern how you get work done, you now turn leadership on top of its head and you say, you know what, we leaders are here to serve you. How can we help? Tell me in your own experiences, because I know you've been with Franklin Covey for 20 plus years, if I'm not mistaken.
25 years.
25 years. It's a long time. You look very youthful, by the way.
Not.
But, wow. What drives you to show up as that leader every day? I know you've got it in your contract, and I know you've got it in the books that you've written. Yeah. But some days, we have our personal motivators. Yeah. How do you show up? What drives you to show up as that leader that you want to be for others?
I think a couple of things. I think in my 30 years in the industry, I worked for the Disney company for 4 years, almost prior to Franklin Covey. So just about 30 years in the leadership business, if you will. Even with Disney, I was in the leadership business. And as a formal leader for 25 of those, I've learned some significant things that also motivates me. One is, and these came to me, Mohammed, in my 40s. I was a pretty poor leader. I was a good manager in my 20s and 30s. But I was a pretty poor leader up until probably my mid-40s. That's as a person who's an officer in the world's most prominent leadership development company. I learned two things mainly. One is that I think a leader's first job is to recruit and retain talent. More so even than mission, vision, and values and systems and structures and strategies, all of those things are important. But I think a leader's first job is to recruit and retain quality talent. In fact, people who are more talented than you are, who are palpably, noticeably more talented than you are, and to be both confident and humble enough, to be vulnerable enough to be okay with that. Because you see, humility flows from confidence. Confident leaders can be humble leaders. Arrogant leaders are incapable of demonstrating humility. And I learned that the tough way. I learned that actually from reading Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers. For your listeners and viewers, I think the best leadership book written in the past decade is Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, where she outlines these 9 accidental diminishing tendencies that we all have, and that our job is to be more self-aware, to be vulnerable, to recognize them, and to become a multiplier of people, not to be the smartest person in the room, not to be the genius in the room, but rather to be the genius maker of others. So what motivates me, one, is to recruit and retain the best talent possible, specifically people who are more talented than me. And not just to be okay with that, but to see that as my role, my responsibility in the organization. But it doesn't stop there. It's not good enough just to retain the smartest people and to recruit the smartest people. You have to then step back as a leader and survey where should you pollinate them throughout the organization beyond your own stewardship. Should they be in the Tokyo office? Should they be in the field? Should they be over in the supply chain? I might be the chief marketing officer, but this person might need to be over in IT because they know a lot about marketing automation. And so you get the point, right? Is to pollinate them throughout the company. I think that's the first big lesson that I've learned. And it's one of the things that has kept me at Franklin Covey is hopefully recruiting and retaining quality talent. The next thing, the next most important role of a leader, I think, is to give people feedback on their blind spots. And that takes a different kind of leader. In fact, I'd say to those who are listening and watching, if you're the kind of leader and you're not capable of moving outside your comfort zone, of discussing the undiscussables, if you cannot summon the courage and the consideration, the diplomacy to talk to people about their blind spots, step down. You don't deserve to be a leader, because this is perhaps the biggest gift you will give the people working for you is to be that one person in their career, 20s, 30s, 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, or beyond, that didn't need to be liked. You sat down and you had a high courage conversation where you declared your intent and you expressed feedback in a very clear and diplomatic way on what is tripping them up. That is the greatest gift you can give someone, and I've been the beneficiary of that. I've been the beneficiary of a lot of leaders in my career that perhaps weren't naturally courageous, but they recognized it was incumbent upon them to do so in a leadership role, and it transformed my career. It saved me from myself on numerous occasions. That's what drives me. It drives me is to, I don't care about being liked at all. My wife probably tells me I've gone too far on that. My job, my gift to you is to tell you what it's like to be on a Zoom call with you, what it's like to work a trade show booth with you, what's it like to launch a product with you, what's it like to be in a meeting with you where you just prattle on and you steamroll over everybody. These things have been said about me as well. And so that's what motivates me, is recruiting and retaining talent and spreading them throughout the company, not hoarding them in my division, and being in a position where I can give people sometimes brutal feedback on their personal hygiene, on their communication skills, on their collaboration skills, on what their reputation is and how different it is from what they want it to be, and to really build in them a self-awareness that they can carry through not just in their career, but back in their personal life as a spouse, as a parent, as a roommate, as a partner, as a neighbor, as a son-in-law, as a committee member. It's a huge gift you could give someone if you care enough.
Well, I can see your passion. And, this is why I think, when you talk about the leader that we need as opposed to the leader that we want, often the leader that we want is not necessarily the one that we need. We never want to take medicine that we need, right? And sometimes we need those leaders to be brutally honest and to be transparent with us, even to the point of, they say the truth hurts. Well, the truth is going to make us rise, right? And, who better to talk about values? Because, when Franklin Covey came out with the 13 values, right? I don't think it was accidental, right? These values that help us, build trust with our relationships.
Yeah,
and the values when we're counterfeit. When you talk about leaders being arrogant, well, I dig deeper and I say, what drives that arrogance? It's lack of security. It's insecurity. It's not being comfortable in my own shoes, right? I can't recognize that somebody knows more than me. And, I was there. To your point, I used to look at somebody who was on my team and think, they know more than me. And I can't yell it.
Yes.
But the flip side, it's say, wow, I'm so lucky. They know more than me. What can I learn from them? How can they support the vision? How can they support me? How can I support them, right?
I think, Mohammed, beautifully said. This is why you have a great podcast. I would argue, I think the greatest competency, leadership competency, that is needing to be developed in leaders today is this vulnerability. You hear about it a lot. Brené Brown has written about it extensively. She's a genius in terms of where she focuses. But this is where people learn. People want to relate to their leaders. Gone in the 70s and 80s and 90s, this big chasm, hierarchy between you and your leader, and they're omniscient and BS. People want, the younger generation is demanding that from their leaders. And I think the greatest teaching capability that leaders have is through vulnerability. Call your team in and say, you know what, I'd like to share with you my 5 biggest mistakes in my career. And I'm not sharing these to confess my sins or to license bad behavior. No. I want you to know that you're going to make mistakes. And I want to work in not just a forgiveness culture, but a pre-forgiveness culture. You're pre-forgiven. Now, not if you steal, and not if you harass someone, and not if you, right? There are boundaries, there are standards. Your character is your ticket in the door. But let me walk you through the biggest sale that I blew. Let me walk you through the biggest interview. Let me walk you through the biggest time when I gave feedback to someone and I crossed the line, and it was not intended that way, but my technique was so, people will be rapt. They'll be captivated. Now you end that with, I'm not telling you this to have you license this or to tolerate any less than me. I'm telling you that we're all on a journey. We're all on a maturation curve. And I expect a lot from you. And I hope that you'll learn from the messes that I have created, because when a leader owns their mess, and by the way, everyone listening here, oh, you've got a mess. And everybody's talking about it. Whether you think it's, private, oh, no, your investors, your boss, your receptionist, your supply chain, your vendors, your clients, everybody knows your messes. So you need to own them, because as a leader, when you own your mess, you make it safe for others to own theirs. And that's an amazing culture.
But that's the humility in leadership as well, is to be able to say, you know what, I can see myself in the mirror. I can see where I'm screwing up. And it's not good enough to just pause there and say, it's okay, that it's not about forgiveness that I can continue to do it, but it's that awareness that, okay, I do it. I'm human. I don't have the skill set, but how can I learn? It's okay to say, I don't know, but I learn. I don't know it yet. So you're setting that role modeling for the people that you work with, and you're inspiring them to be human and to be humble, that there's an opportunity to learn. Learning spirals us to new areas of growth. But when you forcefully tell people what your expectations are without the forgiveness of being able to grow or falling down and being able to get up, and showing that vulnerability can actually lead to courage and strength. And I know we're now both quoting Brene, right? But I think she does so well in that message because it's tried and true. And a lot of the people that I hope are listening to this podcast are male leaders, dominant alpha male, people who are 98% of the leaders who sit in those offices, right? Because what we want to say, this podcast is not just about you. Leadership is self-transformation. And when you can be a good person, you can create relationships with others. You can do that at home. You can do that at the workplace. I hate it when people say, oh, a business relationship. You don't have a business relationship if you don't have values that you've created from a personal relationship, right? I mean, our values are more intrinsic to us as human beings. So take me to some of the best learnings that you've had, because you've now talked about your mess. You've talked about, you're 40-something, right?
Yeah.
Was it one thing that kind of woke you up? Was it someone, or was it an ongoing process?
Yeah, so I'm 52. And,
welcome to the club. You look awesome and nice shade.
I have 3 sons who are 6, 8, and 10. I do not look awesome. I feel like I'm 72 some days. Let me share the biggest learning I've had with you. And by the way, I was at alpha male, right? If you can see me on the screen, I'm obviously Caucasian. I was raised in an upper middle class family in Florida, and I've had a lot of privilege that I'm increasingly more aware of. And I'm increasingly more aware of my responsibility to provide a platform for others that have had less natural access to education and to leadership. Let me tell you the biggest lesson I've learned in my journey. And let's face it, right? To your quote, it's a journey, right? I mean, I was a jackass in my 20s. I thought my job was to be loud and charismatic and forceful and to make all the decisions, and that worked until it didn't. And then in my 30s, I became a little more collaborative, but I was still a jerk, and I was still a know-it-all, and still the genius, and a bit, we refer to it as my reign of terror in my 30s. And then I got married in my 40s. I was single till I was 41. And it calmed me down a little bit. I had a governor. My wife was my governor, right? Not my governess, but my governor, right? In terms of, so you can't say that. You're going to wear that. You can't do that, right? And I finally had someone in my life that gave me some perspective. But here's the biggest lesson I learned, and it was from Dr. Covey. And this isn't meant to be a plug for our company at all, right? Our content sells itself on its own. As you and your listeners know, Dr. Covey is the co-founder of our company, Franklin Covey. He wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book is now in its 30th year and has sold 40 million copies.
Wow.
In over 50 languages. The title of the book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's often misquoted by journalists when they interview me or someone else as The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. No. Dr. Covey very deliberately called it The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is the learning. There's a massive difference between being efficient and being effective. One is not necessarily better than the other, in my opinion. They're both valuable. In fact, as you probably can tell, I'm a very efficient person. I write a column for Inc. magazine. I host the world's largest leadership podcast globally. I'm an officer of a company. I've authored 2 books. I've authored 2 more. They're coming out. I am on about 13 podcasts every week as a guest around the world. I am a father. I'm a husband. I work, and on and on, right? I got a yard to mow. I got a church to be support, and on and on and on, right? I'm a very efficient person. In fact, I would argue that my efficiency mindset has been what has been so instructive to my professional success and even, some financial success. I'm that neighbor, Mohammed, that gets up on Saturdays at 5 and I wash the car at 6. I mow the lawn at 7. I power spray the driveway at 8, right? I'm at Home Depot. The flowers are planted by 9 and I'm ready for breakfast at 9:30. Now I've exhausted some of you, right? But that efficiency mindset has worked very well for me. I get a lot of stuff done. The problem is, because I have a dominant efficiency mindset, that moves over into all of my relationships. In my personal life, with my marriage and my sons, and at work as a leader, as a collaborator, as an executive officer with clients. I'll sit down with a client meeting and I'll order everyone's drinks for them. I'll order all the appetizers and I'll ask for the check when the meals come. I have nowhere to go. I just kind of have a naturally anxious, productive personality. I kind of live my life in the future. I don't live in the past. I don't even live in the present. I tend to live in the future. And the reason I share this with you is because for those of your leaders who are listening that can relate, if you're really self-aware and vulnerable, if you too recognize that you have an efficiency mindset, like to get things done, check things off, move it forward, you're a forward-thinking person, I'll bet you also are making the often fatal mistake of deploying your efficiency mindset in your relationships. You cannot be efficient with people. To quote Dr. Covey, listen carefully. With people, fast is slow. Slow is fast. And that, Mohammed, is the biggest learning I've taken away in 30 years. That there's a time to be efficient, right? My social media, sometimes email, the copy machine, going to the bank teller, the drive-through, right? But in almost every case where it involves people, your sons, your daughters, your nephews, your spouse, your in-laws, people that work with you and for you, you need to slow down. And you need to operate on an effectiveness mindset. Close your laptop, turn off your phone, take off your glasses, check in, moderate how much you're talking versus listening, because most of us listen with the intent to respond, not to understand. I could talk about that for an hour. That's the biggest lesson I've learned in leadership, is that if you want to get done work, if you want to get results done with and through other people, and that's the job, that's the key mindset of a leader, to achieve results with and through others. You have to ask yourself, do I love my people? Do I care about them? Do I care about them enough to move outside of my comfort zone, that is my efficiency mindset, and move into an effectiveness mindset to make sure they're cared about? Let me share one last thought and I'll be quiet.
No.
When the vaccine comes, according to Trump, it's today, right? According to the scientists, it's probably in the summer. No politics there. When the vaccine comes and the recovery comes back, whether it's a V or a W or a K or whatever it is, all of your employees that are being held hostage right now because they have no options, let's face it, the majority of the population is being held hostage because very few companies are hiring, but they're looking and they're recruiting your people right now, and they're connecting to them on LinkedIn, and they're watching them, and they're building their strategy right now to poach your people. You will be in one of two positions come the spring or the summer when the vaccine comes, or whenever it comes. Because it's going to come, and we're going to get back to some semblance of normalcy, and some large percent enough will have the vaccine. We don't have a choice. Your people will stay or leave based on how you've treated them the last 9 to 12 months. And if they feel loved, and they feel engaged, they feel connected, they feel respected because of what you have done as a leader to create a culture in this unprecedentedly difficult virtual environment, they will say yes or they will say no, because people don't quit bad jobs. They quit bad leaders and corrupt cultures. And if you want to find yourself replacing 5 positions or 15 positions in the spring, you still have a chance to create a culture where people choose to stay when they have options to leave.
Right.
It's a long soliloquy. Thanks for your patience.
So let me ask you this. What you said earlier about the need for us to slow down when it comes to relationships, and you really walked me through the how, and I appreciate it. Tell me the why. Why? And I think you hinted at this
Yeah,
earlier
yeah.
when you said
It's all that
people aren't
matters.
assets.
It's all that
Why?
matters.
Peel the layers
Yeah.
off for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a religious person, perhaps your soul is your most valuable asset. If you're not religious, but um, you care, your reputation is your most valuable asset. But at the end of the day, at the end of our life, our job is just our career. Our career is not our life.
They don't define us.
They don't. They often define us,
Yeah.
but they
Well,
shouldn't
yeah,
define us.
right.
Especially if you're single. I mean, when I was single, oh, my career was my complete definition.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could work in my title in a conversation, if I would, I could.
Yeah.
If I could work in my compensation somehow, I would, because I was defined by my tax return.
A walking business card, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think relationships are all that matters in life, because that's your chance to lift someone up. It's your chance to forgive someone. It's your chance to guide someone. Dr. Covey would always say, be a light, not a judge. Be a model, not a critic. It's a high standard. But in an organization, if you are a leader, people don't quit leaders who love them appropriately. People do not go across the street for a pool table or beer on tap or a great game room or ping pong or 1% commission if their leader loves them and they feel nurtured and challenged and respected. And they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to learn a lot from you, especially this new generation, X, Y, Z, Gen everything. That's what they want. Their average tenure now is somewhere between 18 months and 36 months. Our
It's
generation, that was
expensive.
heresy, right?
Yeah.
That was disloyalty.
Yeah.
That word means nothing to the new workforce. They don't think that is being disloyal. They think gossip is disloyal. They don't think quitting is disloyal. That's, of course, I'm going to leave in 24 months. I'm going to have 14 careers. So if you want to lengthen that stay by 4 months or 6 months or 2 years, they will stay because they're challenged and they're respected and they're loved by their boss and they have a good relationship with their boss. It doesn't mean you need to be their friend. It doesn't mean that you need to be chummy. It means that they need to be cared and respected and challenged by you, and they will stay. I see it all the time.
And Scott, if I could package that up, and again, I'm not putting in a sales pitch for Frank Covey either, but if I packaged all those adjectives together, that gives me trust. When I look at why I would stay or leave an organization, why I would aspire to follow or not a particular person, it comes down because I know that person has my back. I trust that person. I know that what they're telling me is not BS.
It's
Right?
all that matters.
Right? And I feel,
no,
yeah.
please continue. Please
No,
continue.
and I get up in front of people often, and I say, if you're going to do anything, it's got to be about building trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have the foundation of the house. You're building a home, right? And I say home here, not house. You're building a home that has faulty foundation. You've got nothing to hold you up. You need to build that trust, and trust has these values, and it has these feelings. And it goes back to something that we've been afraid to talk about in leadership for years. That leadership is about caring. Leadership is not about you. It's never about you. I say it's seldom about you. No, but it's never about you. Leadership has to be about the people that you're there to serve. And you talk about spirituality, right? But whether you believe in a higher force or you believe in a given faith, any message of humanity, humility has said that we are here to serve, right?
I gave a keynote yesterday to a big group, virtually, of course. And one of the questions at the end of the hour was I was teaching how to give high courage feedback. I was role playing this gift that leaders must give their people. I was role playing, and one of the questions was asked, well, so how do you give feedback to someone who doesn't trust you? I said, you don't. In fact, then I said to the 100 people, raise your hand on screen. They were all on Zoom. Raise your hand if you're trustworthy. Everybody raises their hand. And I say, nope, put it down. Who decides if you're trustworthy? It's not you. It's never you. It's the other person. Have you behaved yourself into a reputation of being trustworthy? That's how you give high courage feedback to someone, because they know your agenda, they know your motives, they trust your intent is to help them, not embarrass them or diminish them or humiliate them or capitalize upon their fears or lack of education or whatever. You're exactly right, Mohammed, is if you as a leader do not build a foundation of trust, nothing else matters. I don't care if you've got a MBA from Oxford, or you're a black belt Six Sigma, or you went to Harvard, or you climbed the Matterhorn. None of it matters. And the way you do that is you take responsibility for your actions. You apologize without excuses. You don't try to be the smartest person in the room. You admit you don't have the answers if you don't, which is something that our country's leader could do a lot better, right? Not trying to be an expert on everything. I'm a member of his party, and I can call out what I think are his fatal flaws. And you tell the truth, because people can handle bad news. What they cannot handle is wrong news or no news. And you can deliver tough news in a respectful way that still leaves people's self-esteem intact, their self-confidence whole, and their self-worth whole as well. Because if you deliver it in a way that robs that from someone, shame on you. All it takes is you caring.
That's what I believe leadership was before, is I had to prove I was better than you, more than you, stronger than you, right? And we do that today in our, international relationships or, business to business. It's about proving what you don't have and what I do. Whereas, it's okay to say, hey, you're doing it well.
How do we run for like president and vice president? In fact, I'll be your vice president. I'll be under you. You're Canadian. So are you a Canadian
Don't even take me there. I don't know if you know my history. I tried to get into politics, and I'm going to try again. But and I'll tell you why. It's because I want to serve. I don't want the title. I don't want the role. I figured, politics is a place where you have the opportunity to use the position to nurture the influence and to use that influence to be of service to others. It's, if you want
it'll come back.
It'll come back.
Lost it right now.
Yeah. It's getting here. It's getting here. And let me, with that in mind, are we at that juncture right now? Are we at, I feel, and I say this again, because there are so many men in leadership positions, and we want that not to change because it has to change, but to change because we want it to change. We have to will change, right? Are we at that juncture where, because of COVID, because of what we are experiencing with politics right now, can we shift and move in hopefully the better direction, or do you think this is just a short-lived experience?
I don't know. I'm not sure we've hit rock bottom. Isn't that sad? I don't know. I think we're close in the U.S. I think we're 3 weeks away from the biggest turning point in perhaps 150 years in the U.S. with the U.S. election.
That's powerful.
I don't think it's hyperbole. I think maybe perhaps since, maybe Abraham Lincoln, we're in the biggest pivot point of what our country is going to be.
And we're all going to feel it, not just you guys, by the way, not just people in the States. Like we're thinking about it in Canada. I'm sure others are thinking the same thing.
It's true. It's really, do you have a conscience or do you not? Let me tell you something I've learned as well. You were gracious enough to give my podcast a pitch. It's called On Leadership with Scott Miller. And like you, I interview guests more significant than my stature by far. And I interviewed a woman who wrote a book called The Genius of Women. And her name was Janice Kaplan. And I read this book, and I learned something that has changed my own leadership style. And that is, when you ask someone, name the top geniuses, most of us name men. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Einstein, Pasteur, right? We name usually European or American men. And then you might name architects, right? I.M. Pei and Robert Stern, and you might say Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, right? But they're all men. And the reason they're men is because for thousands of years, men were always the benefactors of men. They were popes, they were kings, they were princes, they were, statesmen, and they always gave the platform to men. And that has reinforced this generational paradigm that men are geniuses, that men are the leaders because their benefactors were always men. And I am a male benefactor looking to broaden my platform That's why I'm trying to make my podcast much more gender neutral, right? Or gender equal, if you will. I'm deliberately trying to build people of color and of different faiths and backgrounds to come on the podcast, to give them a platform, because what I realized after the social injustice riots and the conversations this summer and the marching and the peaceful protests as well, is that as a white male in my 50s, I recognize that I can have white privilege without denying me from all of my hard work. I mean, I've worked 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week for 30 years. I've worked weekends, I've missed vacations, I've worked when I'm sick. I have busted my you-know-what for 35 years. I've mowed more lawns than anybody in the history of mankind. I have raked lawns, I have washed cars, I have picked gardens. I worked at a bakery at 5 a.m. in the morning from 5 until 1 for 4 years. I went to college from 1 to 6 for 4 years. Full-time job, full-time college. But I have white privilege. And I was raised in a family where my mother stayed home. My father worked, an executive job, and I went to college, and I had braces at an early age, and I knew what dry cleaning was, and I was able to vote, and you get the point, I had a car. And so I don't mean to turn your podcast into anything other than ending on an abundant note, which is to hope the best that everyone who has some platform to lift someone else up, to recognize, to quote you, that leadership isn't about you. Take that spotlight, take that microphone and turn it outwards, because you can do that and not diminish yourself. Take a little bit of your platform. Doesn't mean you have to step back or you step aside. Just invite someone up. And a lot of us can do that, and to give other people voices as well.
It's looking at the table where we sit and not vacating those seats, but just making sure that there are empty seats for people to join us and feel like they belong. And inclusion.
And when they come to the seat, that they don't have their opinions squashed. It's a big challenge. It's rocking my world, right? Because I'm used to being in power because I had a title and budget and authority and tenure. What I said goes. And now I'm realizing that leadership style is obsolete.
Yeah. Diversity is a choice, but diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And when we're sitting at that table, you have to recognize that, you need to listen. And again, it comes back to trust. I have to trust that I've made space for you at the table by backing off and using these instead of this. I'm a Muslim. I'm not white, although I can pass for it, but I still have so many layers of privilege, socioeconomic, status, whatever, right? And it's recognizing, as you have, these various layers that allows us to sit back and recognize that we still have work to do collectively, because we won't get there if we don't do it together. And that
I like you. Why are we meeting just now? Where have you been? Where have you been?
What you don't know is I'm not going to let you go that easy, but I do want to recognize you've got an appointment soon. And before you go, I want to ask you, I have something called the Unfiltered Thought of the Week, which is when I share this podcast, I'll kind of air, one nugget of wisdom that, whether you call it advice, whether you call it enlightenment, whether you call it awakening, something that you can share from personal experience that the listener can take away and become a better person, a better human being. Just what would that be?
Can I share a long thing in a short time?
Hey, you can do whatever you want. This is about you today.
I'm going to quote Dr. Covey again, because he's a hero of mine. He said, you can't talk yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into. You can't talk yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into. You can try, but you need to behave yourself out of it by apologies, excuse-free apologies, by recompense, by restitution, by humbling yourself. And I think the biggest issue organizations face today is gossip. Gossip is the biggest cancer. Stop the gossip. Dr. Covey called it being loyal to the absent. He said, you build trust with those who are present when you are loyal to those who are absent. Wow. Because if I hear Mohammed trashing Tina in front of me, what I'm thinking is Mohammed's going to trash me.
Exactly.
And as a leader, your job is to not speak about anybody differently than if they were standing right in front of you. If they're on a plane to Albuquerque, if they're homesick, you speak about them as if they were standing right in front of you, and you will be
Amen.
The model, you will be the light, and you will transform your culture. It starts with you.
And we need more people to believe that, embrace it, and do it. And you know what? I asked you earlier, but I'll maybe answer my own question because I do believe we're at that turning point. And if you and I and others like us are saying this and doing it enough, then I think the turning point has already started. We just need to be part of, raise our voices enough, right?
Do not accept any less.
Yeah.
Do not accept any less in your leader. Do not accept any less in your prime minister or your president. It is not acceptable to have the leader of your company or the leader of your country mock people, right, or to disparage people of different races or religions or genders and then say, I was joking, or right, I didn't mean that, or no, I saw it, I heard it, I quit.
And you know what, Scott? Do not expect any less of yourself.
Well said.
Right. So I want to thank you. I like you too. I want to thank you so much. Without a doubt, I could have continued this conversation because yes, this is a call out or shout out to Frank and Covey, because I think a lot of us need to learn from the great leaders that have come before us that continue to be there at the helm of telling us what relationships are all about. And this isn't a branding issue. You know, anyone that can say, how can we do things better? How can we create better, more inclusive communities? How can we lead with love and recognize that even though we may come from many different nations, we form one race, one community, and that's humankind. So I want to thank you for...
How did you get so smart? How did you get so smart?
I listen to people like you.
You got to invite me back on someday. I'm writing 2 books next year. Next year, 2021.
Just say when, because I'll be knocking on your virtual door. I want to thank you. God bless you.
Thanks,
stay positive. Stay making keep shining on the rest of us, because that light will help us transform together. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Mohammed. My pleasure. My honor.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered, the show about authentic leadership and personal growth. Like what you heard? Click subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.